Awesome. All right, so let's talk about a scenario where we've been shipped a brand new laptop from Dell, or I'm not a Dell salesperson, so whatever, HP, name it. But we've got a brand new device, and we want to get it into autopilot so the first minute it comes in, it's associated with its AD object, it's associated with its Intune object, and it's assigned to a user. Well, in order to do that, you could either go through the process and get it sucked into autopilot, like we're showing here, or you could get the hash. And if you have the hash, it's pre-built, and it knows about that object ahead of time. And so there's two ways to do that. One's through the vendor. They do it. They actually just spin it up and grab the hash and then get the hash and then wipe and reload. And actually Ingram Micro will also do that service for you, where they open it up, unbox it, grab the hash, reboot it, and then set it back down for OOB. Or you could get it here, and I'll walk you through a process. So first things first, let me kind of show you what's on this flash drive, and I will get Paco to send this data to you, this script to you for this process. Easy to find as well out there, but there's a get hash. And so what I've done is on this flash drive, I have three things. I have Microsoft's built-in script for get Windows Autopilot info. It is a Microsoft script. You can download it. I have a command prompt because I'm launching from command prompt when I'm doing this method. So I have to have some method to then take it to its PowerShell compendium. And then I have a zip file of it because I wanted it backed up. So really it doesn't need to be there, but that's my zip file of those two. And so on the flash drive, which this is not the flash drive's already over here, but this is the contents of that flash drive. So if you look at the get hash file, it's just turning off echo enabling WinRM, which is necessary, right? You have to have WinRM to do this. And you have to have PowerShell with a no execution policy unrestricted in order to accomplish this as well. So this is essentially just getting me the data and then giving me an out file that puts it out as a appropriately formatted CSV, okay? And so you could actually grab this flash drive and go machine number 1, machine number 2, machine number 3, and it'll just keep appending to this CSV file, okay? So this is a method to grab multiple of these hashes if you've got a box of 10 laptops that came in or something. That calls this PowerShell file that's here. It's going to launch my ISE because I'm an idiot, but it's okay. We'll wait. And then this is Mr. Michael Niehaus. I'm not taking his work from him. This is Microsoft's. And it's going to go in and get the hash the way Microsoft needs this hash in order for you to import that into the appropriate length. So what I've done, and we'll shift over to our, no, we won't, because you can't do that in File Manager. My assigned macro is a bad macro. We'll kill that, and we'll go over to 3. Okay, so this device is past the OOB state a little bit because it's already gone through the privacy screen. So I'm kind of like a little bit after. But when you're at this state in Windows, you can hit Shift F10, right? And what Shift F10 is going to do is bring up a command prompt, an administrative command prompt. So I now can do things on that command prompt. So I'm going to type in D:, and I'm going to enumerate the list there so you can see this is my file, like I said, and one of them is get hash. So I'm just going to type in get hash. And I'm going to hit enter. And it's going to say enabling WinRM, which is just an echo line. It actually could say enabling Matt's awesome. That would be cool, but it wouldn't actually enable Matt awesome. It would just enable that. And then it's going to add the firewall exception that it needs in order to do this. Even though it's a local host, it's hitting it as if it was on the network. It's just hitting itself. And then gathering the autopilot hash and then writing it. And so it says, hey, I found serial number C22LNC2. And then you press any key to continue. So I'm done. Right? So I've got my hash. Now what you would do, presumably, is shut this back down so that the next user would come into it as if it was an OOB state, right? Because you haven't finished OOB. So I call it OOB, out-of-box experience, whatever you want to call it. And so then you bring your handy-dandy flash drive back to your admin machine where you're going to be using it. And we'll switch to that. So Alt-1. Okay. So choose what to happen, do nothing. But we'll open this one. So comp hash is now a CSV file that was in there that wasn't there before. And so what we'll notice is that comp hash CSV has a couple things in it, a new look, as a matter of fact. But it has the serial. It has the comma. This would actually be where you would put in Windows product ID. It doesn't have that. So it's just grabbing the hash, this last comma, hardware hash, right? And so I should be able to come into autopilot. So I'm going to go into the wonderful navigation of devices, Windows, no, devices, oh, I'm an AAD, no, I'm in point, okay. Devices, Windows, and then Windows enrollment, because they don't just want to make it easy and have an autopilot deep link for this database, but you'd come in here and say import, right? So I'm going to import this. The list should be in that CSV file. That's going to be on my flash drive. And as long as it's properly formatted, it's going to say rows formatted correctly. If Matt Lee types it, not going to be formatted correctly. If Script types it, success. So, and then you click import, and it's going to bring in this device that we've never seen before, right? Because remember the other one was the 2 X-Ray 9 Yankee. This one's going to come in once it's done. I do love Microsoft. They're like, it could take 15 minutes, right? Thanks for the whole database replication timeline warning. And then what I'll do is we'll come back to this in a few because I don't want to waste another 10-minute period. So I'll wait a few minutes to make sure this is populated. And then we'll do a sync. Because what's happening is you're seeing the results of this database. So the sync is actually syncing with something back, but it then will populate here once we have that finished. So import in progress, elapsed time 0 minutes. I also believe that increments up. So as you go through this process, that says 2 minutes and 3 minutes. But just know that you'd want to do this as a bit of a Ronco, set it and forget it type thing, right? You just import your 100 hashes and then walk away and then later come back to it. The other point that I pointed out to someone before is, see this 2 X-Ray 9 Yankee Y, or Yankee Quebec 72? See this, when you check the checkbox, you now can assign user. And that's where you do the marriage of the user to autopilot. Remember we talked about the marriage of the user to the Intune device, unrelated to the marriage of the user to autopilot. And so you would want to come in and say, test user. We're going to assign this to test user, select. And in which case you have a user-friendly name that's already going to be there. The device name you could name as well right here. Group tag you could put in. And then down here the same information of the associated Intune devices and as well. And then also a last contact. Has this ever been through autopilot? Right? And so this never says, no, I've never been through autopilot. Even though we've been in enrollment, which is what makes this even more confusing, right? It's not in autopilot. So we'll save that. And we should be able to see the difference. When that one comes back up, it's at 94%. I'll shift it here in a minute. We should be able to see it come back up. Yeah, and it did increment, so now it says 1 minute here. Yeah. Oh, it says it's updated? Let's see. Ah, woo! Awesome. So now, C22, we're going to go ahead and assign that to the real Matt Lee. So, well, fake real Matt Lee, but whatever. You know what I mean. Configure a unique name. This name will be ignored in hybrid AD, and device name still comes from the domain join profile. So what they're really saying is, here's a field that does nothing, if you'd like to use it. Yeah, so in essence, you could put in a name there I never have. But we should have a device now associated with Matt Lee and associated, and then the other device associated with, and you'll see them up here, test user, and then I've got to refresh for that to actually show, I think, my assignment. I might even have to sync it. Because the user, even though I just, I did finish assigning that, yeah? C22, we're going to go to Matt Lee. Yeah, I saved that. Ah, maybe I didn't save it. Okay. You have to set it and then save it. I actually have done that a couple times before. So you say it, you say select, and you think you're done. You also have to then go down to the bottom of that object and save it. If you click out of that window, it just gets rid of anything you've done. So should have, when we click on C22 now, Matt Lee is the user-friendly name associated. The user is my actual UPN, so mlee at full UPN. And so then you have a friendly name. So if you wanted to do something else, like give Mr. Lee some credentials, you could do that. CISSP, whatever, ETC, and save it. It just has that so that you see their name there with that rest of it, but it's kind of useless. So that other one is going through auto. No, it's doing the install. That'll be a minute. Okay. Just want to make sure. So this one's now in autopilot, which means that we could go reset it. Golly, whose jinky setup is this? And I'm just going to go shut down. Oh, I have a keyboard. Golly, guys. Oh, bad user. I told you that ahead of time. We'll do pronto. Shutdown -P for pronto right now. And then once that shuts down, I should be able to bring it back up, and it should see it in autopilot within, as long as I give it internet. Okay. Because we have it in the autopilot database, It will have no associated, it has no associated Intune device. But I actually want to point this out while I'm waiting. When you create it this way, because remember we imported this, look at what the name of the Azure AD object is. It actually made it the serial number. So it went ahead and made a unified object in AD to match this object in Autopilot. Why would that matter? Well, that way when it comes up in AD, it already knows the device, right? It's already in Azure AD. It's associated with my tenant. So that's why the Autopilot part is it sets and greases the slide on some of those things ahead of time. So we'll go back to control 2. No, never 2. Never 1. Well, 3. Okay. So hopefully this comes up. It asks for internet. I'm able to provide it internet. And then it should just go through Autopilot. There's no assigned profile because it won't do that until it goes through and determines if it has a TPM. So we'll go ahead and connect to my hotspot from T-Mobile. Refresh, please.
So you assign this to you.
This one, yes, sir. Yep.
You won't have to sign in or anything.
We're going, as long as it has a TPM 2.0, I should not. And actually, either way, it should at least get me to a sign-in screen at some point afterwards, because it'll see the device. But we'll all find out together whether everything's coordinating well for us. Why is this not showing up? Do I have to? Dustin? Where's Dustin? Nobody? Or Dustin's hotspot, so on and so. No, season. There's mine. Okay, good. I was going to snag yours. FBI van is always free. That's literally the password. Okay. So now that we have inner tubes, we're going to go next. And so remember when I said before, the first time we went through this iteration, it was checking a few things, looking at Microsoft, talking to Azure AD a little bit. If everything goes right with Autopilot, this should just step through the rest of this until it's time for a user to sign in. If it had a hardware 2.0 or TPM 2.0 from the hardware, it would step through and also have some user policies applied, the user-based policies, and still present the same way. You can control different experiences, but for the most part, it's going to do the same thing. So I'm hoping everything goes great, and this jumps into Autopilot. I'll know it when we see it. Provide power. Yeah, I'll touch on that. I'm actually part of the Lighthouse advisory, so I get around. But the Lighthouse is what it does. Once you register, in the beginning you had to run a script to set up Lighthouse. Like it was this massively tenant tie-in to their third-party thing. Now, once you get in Lighthouse Preview, which each MSP here can go into Lighthouse Preview. It is open. You can go register if you don't have it. Kelvin Trafalgar is a really good resource for getting access to that, but it should be widely available now. And so if you get into the Lighthouse Preview, what it says is, here's your clients with licensure that support Lighthouse. If they don't have Business Premium, if they don't have an Intune license added as a third-party E3 mobility and security bundle or something like that, they won't be selectable. But as long as they're allowed, then it'll be in Lighthouse. And when you go to, I think it's just lighthouse.microsoft.com, but when you go into Lighthouse, you'll see all your clients, and it'll show here's the clients that don't have MFA, here's the clients that don't have this, here's the clients with this many devices, here's this many devices not compliant. And we're all trying to struggle through what is that? What does that heads-up display need to look like? What does that multi-tenancy need to look like? I think there's like 300 or 400 partners now in it. But yes, all of this is one layer down from Lighthouse. And Lighthouse has varying degrees of capability of modifying the layer below it today. So if that makes sense. So there's still some things you can only do in this tenant. But the difference is with Lighthouse, and I'm not going to say the word because I'm still under that whole member prosecute thing for this other one, but as they're reimagining their delegated access permissions, combined with this, those two will come together to give you a very supportable RMM for clients that are on the modern experience. What we did at Iconic, initially, I started just having the clients that were, what we call them Goldilocks clients, the ones that made the most sense, no on-premise infrastructure needs, SaaS applications, identity-centric, modern apps. We'd move those over. Some MSPs have made business units for that. where you actually have a business unit. Their pricing structure is a little different because they don't have a RMM cost. They don't have the same things. And so you could find those Goldilocks clients and treat them over there. I think a company starting as an MSP today and only taking clients that are Goldilocks clients could make a very profitable MSP that's very scalable pretty quickly in the next 6 months. Some of the key components that are coming for that. So short story is, yes, it's part of Lighthouse, but it's like you do so much more down here than you can in Lighthouse right now. Yeah. But their vision is, they won't say it, but it's an RMM killer. I mean, it's their point. So, all right, so it didn't go through the device-based autopilot, unfortunately. All right, that's all right. This is the one assigned to Emily. Actually, you know what? Let's take a poke at this. It could just be Azure delay. We'll try one more. And that other one's, oh, no, the other one's pretty ready too. We'll come back to it. The other one we know is an autopilot. And it's the one that's asserting that it doesn't have the right, it doesn't have a TPM 2.0. Well, fair enough. Oh, it doesn't have internet. That'll do it. It doesn't have internet. That's why it went to let you set it up without. Am I gonna have to re-oob this? I might have to re-oob this. We'll just prep it real quick. That won't take very long. Once it boots, I'm just going to shift F10 and then do a sysprep, and then hopefully it'll go back to that whole process where it's actually doing its checking in with Microsoft. So 10, CD, sysprep, and then, like I said, don't check any boxes, just sysprep. It shouldn't take but 3 or 4 minutes probably for the whole sysprep and come back to oob. So as we saw there, it's pretty quick. There used to be a limitation on sysprep numbers. You could only, like, at certain points, you couldn't sysprep anymore with some of the earlier builds of Windows 10. But now, there's really not much risk to it. So I don't want to risk switching to the other laptop and it going through and missing this one, so be patient with me. But hopefully this comes back up and goes through asking me for internet and then checking in with Microsoft, and that it's updated on this database by then. TLDR, though, if you do it today and come back tomorrow and bring the device online, you're much more assured to have autopilot already populated in Azure correctly. So, I might as well sync the database while I'm here too, just in case. Okay. So this stage, it should come right back into. What's that? It's as tilted as my left eye right here. It's nice. Okay, so now we're going to stay in English, United States. Should ask me for intertubes. US, yes. Yes, seems logical. Skip. You do have to still do this in autopilot. You still have to go through these screens. Is this the right keyboard layout? That's where you'd add your Cyrillic keyboard. If you wanted to say add another keyboard, you could also do it through configuration. We're not going to connect to Dustin here. Matt's turned on. I hate how that, like, if you drop, it doesn't see it until you recycle. So we get to wait a second. Mm-hmm. On the personal hotspot on your iPhone. Dustin is? Nice. We'll see. It'll come back up here in a sec. There it is. Or nope. I spoke too soon, but it's coming. What is this? E89. What is that? I just didn't want you to have to say your password. Is it? Epic. Yeah, no, not at all. All right, so we have inner tubes. Next. What we hope to happen is as it's going through this, now we have some important network setup to do. It's recognized by the autopilot database and continues forward. If it goes and asks you organization or home setup, you've failed. So once this happens is when it should transition to that same autopilot screen that we went through with the user-based model, now based on the hash being identified rather than Matt Lee typing in a password. Yep, I think we're good. We'll see. Maybe we saw that last time. And remember, when you're getting these from a vendor, you'll have shipping delay, right? They will have sent them over. They're in your partner center. You've already got the idea. You bring them over. All right, I think we're good. Because it's going to reboot. So I think we're going into autopilot. Yes, if you check that box of convert hashes to, yes, 100%. And we're in autopilot now. It wouldn't have rebooted otherwise. So it won't look any different, but what it's doing is marrying all three of those databases to the same object anchored by the autopilot entity. Why that one? Well, it's the one with the hardware hash. It's the one most likely to be that device, right? Than a name or something. So theoretically, we shouldn't be prompted for user credentials until we're ready to sign into Windows. The only difference between a user-based and a hardware hash 2.0 self-deploying preview is that more of that user policy is applied in that time when they're sitting there watching paint dry, right? Not after they've signed in as them and identified their user as them and applying those user-based policies. So we'll go ahead and say accept.
You did this from the manufacturer.
Yeah, I did this by grabbing a hash.
You did it like you said.
Right, sir.
They just give you they'll pull it, and then eventually the hashes show up in your.
Yeah, they show up in Partner Center, which I'm not a partner on this tenant, so I can't show that. But you give them your Partner Center GUID. Yeah, we still failed somehow. But you give them your Partner Center GUID, and then they just show up in Partner Center. You can assign them to the client in Partner Center, and then it shows up in the hash. It's kind of like them just working that in, if that makes sense. Yeah, so we're gonna have a bad demo here, so I apologize. But autopilot really is cool when you get it. I do want to show you the completely joined device, though. So. So while that's going through the rest of the setup, it will drop into the autopilot screen that we set up here in a second. I'm going to switch to the other one and hope it's had longer to bake in from a device perspective. Because see, it should have already said no privacy showing. Remember we set that in our device-based deployment. Actually, I didn't modify his ingestion policy. But anyways, let me switch these real quick. We don't have to take a break this time, but I'm just going to move this back. Hope we get this one. What was really cool about it, though, is once it's all in autopilot and you send it that reset, your users get a very interesting, like a very seamless experience as it goes through it, if you have a 2.0 hardware. This one should not have internet yet, right? Sweet. You're being a good guy here, bud. Other keyboard. Actually, it did go through autopilot. Yeah, came right into the hello part of it. So we might have both of those devices set up properly in autopilot afterwards. That was what that restart was doing. It did go through autopilot, I think. Let's see what we got over here. Never contacted. Never contacted. Sync. Oh, it's been less than 10 minutes. Let me look at something real quick. I want to make sure that that other enrollment policy, the user-based one, that existed. That's a user-driven. So it's done to all devices. Ah. Yeah. Okay. That should have worked. Hide. It's grabbing the other one. So anytime you see the auto, and I'm spending a lot of time on autopilot when the intention was in tune and MEM, but the point. No devices have been assigned to these autopilot profiles yet, it seems. Ah, there we go. Device-based Matt Lee got assigned one now. Okay, cool. Which device? 2XY, that one. So it did officially go through autopilot. If you notice, Windows deployment profiles, device-based Matt Lee, the one that was encompassing of all devices. Now a device has gone through that and has now been assigned appropriately. The other device that was already in there was trying to get assigned to the 2.0 policy, and see how it still says not assigned? That's kind of back to that stupid replication thing, right? That you have to click this sync for the autopilot. So it's kind of one of those where there's paint drying kind of conversation. So we already saw evidence that the group knows there's a device that's associated, right? The Windows autopilot piece, but in here, when you're looking at it, it says no profile assigned. Even though we know there's one because we looked at the profile shows that device. So that's kind of that sync piece that I'm waiting on the 10 minutes to expire, as you see up there. But set up for organization, next. Okay. And then this one's test T user at set plus. Sorry. All right. So we're signing that one into. I just want to get both of them to show up in autopilot. The other thing I wanted to point out, though, is if you've been watching here, ConnectWise now has some devices starting to show up in Screen Connect. So we actually got my cloud PC that I assigned to that group, got pulled into the Screen Connect group as well. So it did get deployed. And I would wager when we get into these, we'll start seeing Office. There we go. So now we're going through the, oh, I point like you guys can see. Sorry. Like, look, right there, guys and gals. Yeah. And then you'll see this working through those processes for that, through the user-based autopilot and user-based enrollment model, not the device-based. I wish I had checked that. I apologize. I really could have made this lab a little better. I assumed they had them. All right, so wants me to set up hello. Ha! Bob. Okay, so we'll go okay. I'm gonna skip it for now, but your organization needs more. This is part when I said force them to have that set up. That's what this would do for the Windows Hello. It's making me set up my user's information because it's a brand new user. So imagine you just set up this user as a frontline worker, you ship them a laptop, and give them their password, and they're going to sign in. It's going to walk them through setting up their 2FA or their office phone number, outside email address, that kind of stuff as part of that. I am so not wanting to get the app done right now. I want to use a different method. But you would normally expect your users to be able to do that through through, setting up the Authenticator app. And so this guides them through that as part of their Windows setup. So if you're thinking of onboarding a new employee or something, it's a very clean way to do that. In fact, I joked at PAX 8 when I went through my onboarding, they had a whole day for me to set up my Authenticator, go through. I'm like, that's a script. That day should be a script and a walkthrough. Like, nobody should have to do this. There's my public cell. I would definitely say if you've ever explored that, I carry 2 cell phones for a reason. I have a public number we give out and, stuff we don't care about's on that. And then oh, there's my friend Amy. And then a private cell that has, my valuables. So I got a code. 601 601 409. Should be now. And so it's now writing my cell phone as the 2-factor methodology to Azure Active Directory, right? So you're doing that all as part of that guided setup for the user. As long as I typed that in properly, I did. Didn't. Did you kill my hotspot? 601 409. Try it again. If it resends a code, I have to have internet. So see if we get a code. Damn new user. Okay. 464584. What are my additional details for failure? Oh, that's helpful. Thank you. I am stymied by the fact that I'm going to have to set up an app. And I don't want to. Well, the text-based message just failed for some reason. But this is that test user I created today. Put it on the right cell phone. Yep, that's the one. Fine, I'll use their Authenticator app. There's my 7+1 Labs. It's cool. I'm just chilling here. It's all right. Approve. Okay. So should get that. Oh, Face ID. Sorry. Awesome. All right, next. All right, skip for now. It's probably related that I'm trying to register 2 users with the same everything. So maybe correlated, but we should pretty quickly see Screen Connect and stuff start installing. Office start installing, which will consume some bandwidth. But let's go look at work or school. I just want to make sure we're happily registered. And we are connected to 7+1 Labs. All right, so let me switch back to the other one. It's doing its thing. Okay, we're good. So Alt-1. Want to look at our autopilot database data. And let's sync. We're syncing. Woohoo! Woo, we got past our 10 minutes. And you'll also notice, so remember earlier when I pointed out that the Azure AD object was C22LNC2, the serial number? It's the same object, it's just been modified to its actual name that just got reported in, right? So the name that got reported in was desktop-G63, because it didn't go through the hardware base, so it didn't get a serial number name that I put in there, is the other part of that. But this one, yeah, okay, Jesus, it happens. Pardon my excitement. Okay, so now we actually have a tri-associated Azure Active Directory and Intune and Autopilot for the 2X9Y device. That's the one back there that is going through Autopilot appropriately. So first it got pulled into the database. There was enough Azure replication time that it's talking to all its edge servers when you connect into the internet that it's now went back and said, yep, you're Autopilot, yep, you're Intune, yep, you're here. And so they all are now registered together. And clicking on this takes you to the device in Intune, lets you come in here and say, I want to rename this, right? And I can rename that to Matt dash %, serial. Nope. This is the bracket one. And then rename. I didn't set it to restart after rename, so it should just rename. And that's this device that's back in the background here, not the one I'm filming, but this is the Matt Lee object. Yeah, the other one's test user. See if we see on here, test user is the object that's back there working that now has gone through Autopilot, but it's instantly got both of those associations with that device back there. And then Matt Lee is the device that's on, right now here, and it's got my user already set there from the last time I signed in, but that failed in the middle of the hello registration. No. Because you have to assign a user manually, like in the Autopilot side, you have to say this is Johnny or this is Sally today. It doesn't and that's kind of the point. You have to do 3 times the work, right? Because you're doing it here, and if you mess that up, you've got them asynchronous. And I mean, I had a technician at Iconic for our internal IT team. That's all they did. And I'm trying to point out that it's not quite road ready on some of these things, but yes. Oh, yeah. For normal practical purposes, though, the user signing in is the user. So for most of your deployment methods as an MSP, you get somebody a device, you sign them into that device, then it's already going to be associated to that user's profile from that metric in Intune, because it was the first user to sign in. It shows it as that personal device. But in a perfect world, you're pre-assigning some of those things, and it's all in one place. Today, it's not. So short story is just setting it up and letting the user sign in does that association in Intune right away. You saw how mine test user showed up under test user. Yeah, and you can do it ex post facto too, right? Because you can come into Autopilot after it's already gotten in there and then assign a user to it, knowing the user that's associated with that device. So that way next time, because Autopilot only comes up the next time it's in OOB state. Autopilot has nothing to do with normal management, right? So that's where this comes into play. So this is someone stole my laptop. I want to know that that's going to come back onto the internet, and even though they're trying to sign it up for their own settings, it just gets sucked right back into my organization, right? So you could tell a very compliant story, and so that's Autopilot. Management is the separate database, and it's Intune. That part is a little more predictable. But Autopilot itself has the additional value of, I lost this laptop. I don't need a laptop locker of some sort. I just need to prove it was encrypted. And if somebody wipes and reloads it, even from a disk, the hardware's going to match it and it's going to come back into my Intune. That's the other part of that. Yeah. So I spent a lot of time trying to show that and got us a little off track. But yeah, that is the other part of this. Oh, we got a code. We're signed up with hello. Never can you type it there, though. All right. So now you have Windows Hello being elicited. As I had set that up, if you remember, I set up I didn't modify it, but the Windows Hello is set on these devices that come through Autopilot like that. And so it's protecting my user account through that at the device level early on. The challenge you have is a lot of regulators don't see that as MFA. So they don't see that, and they're probably right. There's no active MFA that's happening after you do it the first time. So once I set it up and it's stored in my TPM, there's nothing like Duo that I can show a log got pushed to me and I had to say yes to it every time I sign in. If Microsoft just carried that torch one step further and said every time you sign in, it's going to push. You can choose that as an option. That would solve a lot of third-party software that you don't have to buy. I mean, my costs for 200 users at Iconic was huge for Duo. And now it's wanting me to set a PIN because I had that set in our settings. So I'm just going to set a 6-digit PIN. So it's finishing its hello registration that it was in the middle of earlier when I abandoned. Yes. Later on is harder once you've gone down the hello path, but you can set it in the hello settings in that spot where I was at when I was showing you. And you can change the behavior of hello. Microsoft's got a lot of work to do on hello, in my opinion, for it to be road ready. It's been around for forever. Did everybody see you can now use U2f tokens for your personal Microsoft accounts and remove the password completely? Yeah, so Microsoft in this, you can, like if I walk up to my laptop here, and it's actually the one that's on my wallet, if you want to know where to target me. But this U2f token, when I sign into my laptop here, I don't have to type in a password. Why does that matter? Well, if I assume compromise, and I assume that this laptop has a keylogger on it, I am not typing a password. I'm plugging this in. It knows it cryptographically is Matt Lee, my private account, and then it asks me for a PIN that's associated with this device, right? So you have to have this, and you have to get in, but a keylogger won't capture my password to be used later on the web. So the device never gets exposed to it. Same thing with hello. Once you've typed that password in once and stored it, to Microsoft's credit, and what they're arguing about MFA is that now the user's never going to expose that password again to a potential keylogger. So the cloud enumeration and attack side of that will be less because I don't have a username and a password to use. I only have what was valuable only in this machine, which means now I need to attack that machine as the only path to my capabilities. So yeah, maybe a little tangential, but I hope we have like Office and we're starting to see Screen Connect coming in. Our OneDrive should associate. So we'll kind of let it go. I will tell you that Intune is not one of those things where, like with an RMM, it's doing some scripting on the back end, and so you only have the delay from the RMM to the script and the action being executed. With Intune, it's a little more rubber bandy, right? A little bit more, well, it'll eventually be there. Like it'll be eventually set the way you want it. Doing the autopilot delay when it does come through autopilot and saying, don't let it start until these configurations have been applied, don't let it start until it has, will help some of that, right? But doing it this way coming in by user, the user's in, but they might not have Word, and they might not have the other things, and so it provides a worse user experience. Once you go hardware hash-based and it comes in and says all these things must be configured, all these things must be on this based on this user's needs, yeah, you get a better experience. So SCCM would have been the de facto method before this, and it would be much faster, quote unquote, because if you've ever used SCCM, it has its own challenges. You can tie SCCM into this to get some of those additional features that used to exist. When I was showing through and you had that, there's that piece I jumped over, you can tie SCCM to actually work in conjunction with Intune on a hybrid device in that way. And so you'll get that quicker side from the SCCM and the more defendable side, or defensible side, I would say. They're going to get there, but today SCCM beats it pretty good, at least on predictability of time and predictability of outcome. I think SCCM does a better job, in my opinion. But that's pretty much it. I mean, we're 8 minutes shy. Does anybody have any questions? I know this was just meant to be a kind of skirt over the top of it and get a good experience. Oh, we're good. I'm wrapping up. Yeah, so, yes, ma'am. What was your name so I can stop saying ma'am? I'm such a Southerner. Diana. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Good. 5 seconds. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. You have to do it. It's defensible. It's, again, you could stand up in front of 12 peers and say, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. These are all best practices. They all reduce the surface area down from 100% surface area to 82% or 60 or 40 or 30. So short story is, I can use a VPN, I can use a VPS, I can use a server in Amazon. All of those meet the requirement. But what you start doing when you think that way is imagining outside that and saying, okay, let's go find Amazon's errand block, and let's just go block that as a default. Let's go find, right? And you start finding ways to continue refining that so that you say, hey, listen, if they're on NordVPN, they have an errand block. I'm not going to use Nord and allow it in unless I'm using Nord. Now, if you take that a step further and you make my heart really happy, you start thinking in the form of SASE, right? Where you're starting to say, you know, secure access, secure edge, or service edge, where you're saying, I only let you connect from this IP. And that IP is your SASE edge. And now your SASE edge has to be deployed with certificates. It has other attack surface stuff that limits that down. And so it's all about just learning where the attack surface is and making those choices to restrict it, or follow a framework so you can defend yourself defensively in court, right? So yes, short story is SASE is probably what solves a lot more of this, just because even before accessing the identity edge, you can set additional parameters that must be met before accessing the identity edge to then further access the data edge, right? Back to that kind of identity is the center of security. So yes, great point. It takes nothing to get past that. But I still do it. So, and I've locked myself out. I was in Puerto Rico, and I hadn't counted that Puerto Rico's not part of the US. I was flying there for a speech, and my stuff was all on Azure. And so I'm like panicking, going, can someone unblock Puerto Rico for me? That's funny. Good for you. They needed to just focus on their damn honeymoon. Yes, sir. No, because I'm going to go attack your static IP and get access to a machine. Yeah, no, it's a misnomer. This is my opinion. Take it for what it's worth, but it's done for convenience, not security. And anytime you can answer the question, is this for convenience or security, and it's not both, then it's probably not good. Yeah. It just means that I can go put a Wi-Fi pineapple out at your office, grab some DOS, and now I'm on your network if you don't have zero trust there, which again, it's back to this whole executive order around zero trust right now. There's your ceiling, in case you haven't seen the ceiling. Yes, sir. Yeah. But his question was, if I'm coming from this IP, don't make me 2FA, right? And that's bad because you're removing some of those extra additional layers. But to your point, if you're on a VPN, in fact, that's what you can do very easily. Say, okay, I'm only going to let you even sign in and do your MFA if you're coming from this IP. So you could say, I'm going to spin up a VPS with a virtual private server that gives me a VPN, and say, okay, if you're coming from 68.44. whatever, then now let them in, and that's the first layer of access. But it's not saying drop the other layers of access. Does that make sense? It's a more restrictive layer. It says now remove these other billion IP addresses and only allow this one. So certificates work really well too. If you have good PKI infrastructure, with public key infrastructure available that you can say, and make them have this cert, you get even smaller the stack that you can access it from, if that makes sense. So it'd be a good idea, but the answer is theoretically no. I mean, if you do have a cryptographic representation that you have possession of, it's a limiting factor that I would have to go get as a threat actor. So yeah. So yes, self-signed certs are better than no cert in that regard. Yeah. Anybody else? I would say I also welcome a lot of feedback. I don't teach very much in this way. This is kind of one of my first. I've done it with my internal techs, and I've done it with them in a lab. With kind of my first time trying to do this in a planned fashion. So definitely would welcome feedback to be better if I do this again. So, yeah. All right. Well, thank y'all.